Hello. In this fairly short stream, I'm gonna so as you remember from the last video, we did stock and we just did this commit, and you know, it was just I just accepted the defeat to to make um to make our handlers handle async code. So let me show you what was the problem again, if you don't remember. So if you check out this commit, okay, do we have any diff? How is that I have any commit here? Git let's do a, so let me just show you the end result first, and then I show you the how I did to fix it. So you remember our proof of concept for checking if something is async was to run this with a sleep, and now you saw that it was sleeping for 5 seconds, I think, in the code. But if we run this as a normal without the slash sleep, it just returns immediately. And it also can respond to requests while waiting for this to finish. So this is what we have now. And if you take a look at the code, we can see that our handler, and we actually, well, we needed to change some designs of the code, and I'm gonna tell you why, but I just removed the predicate stuff, and we are going to add them in the next stream, but for now our server just takes the handler. And let me show you why what we changed. So if you now take a look at our server struct, we see that server became basically a generic type in Zig. So in Zig, generic types are most of the times are created as a function that take some comp type value, some generic values that we need to be sure that compiler makes sure that they are available completely in the compile time. So why we need our config is not important. It can be not comp time. And actually, I think the changes that I stashed was removing this from here, basically. And why we need the handler to be comp time. So as you remember, let me check out to the commit. So git log, let me copy this. Okay. So if you take a look at our HTTP right now, you see that our server is just a normal struct. Where are the handlers passed in? The handlers were part of the config, and they were not compile time known, because in config they were just a slice. This is the start of not knowing the compiler not knowing this in the compile time, because slices are some kind of dynamic, because they are basically a pointer to most of the times a pointer to an array with also a len. So it's not known at the compile time. And the problem was here. So when the compiler, so we are already running our server in the evented mode, because we did define this constant. But when it was trying to, and we also were running the run handler as an async call, in an async context. But the problem was the compiler by default tries to call this func, and also this one, this calls this, and this will call our user or our personal handler. And this, because it wasn't compile time known, the Zig compiler couldn't figure out what was how much it needs for its frame. So you remember our frames in here, so we already have this frame. Zig for each async call needs to be able to define figure out the frame size and how the frame looks like. But since our handlers were not compile time evaluate, we couldn't evaluate our handlers in compile time, the compiler couldn't figure out the frame, so it just calls them in sync way. So if you take a look at our main in here, you remember that we had all of these problems and we couldn't sleep, right? The code were just basically not working. But what we did, so let me just back to master. The branch is ahead. Oh, okay. It's not important. It's just removing two unused functions. So now in this change I just did, and I was playing with this in maybe 4 hours, and actually I did cheat a bit, and I looked at the other project. I don't remember what was that. I think it was called Apple Pie. Apple Pie GitHub. It was a Zig web server. Yes, nice. So it's, as you see, a Zig web server, and I looked at the code and figured out that he's doing server as a generic struct. So I did, and I understand why. After playing around a bit with the code, I understand why we needed to have these as a compile time known. I tried to, fix the calling issue we had with the async call, but it was so complicated with this frame buffer and stuff. I couldn't figure it out. But the approach that this project took was really good, and I took the same path. Basically, the API looks completely different, but basically the actual point to make this work was to make the handler a comp time known value. So now we have a working HTTP server, and we can define our own handlers, and everything is async. Really nice. Next step for us would be to first we need to bring back the predicates we have, because I love them and I really think that we should have them. But the change would be that predicates should be so remember from the before we had a slice of handlers, right? So we need to we can have the same thing, but, and actually let me show you just this type. The handler is just a function that takes a context and returns nothing, either an error or nothing. So we should have a slice of handler, or I'm gonna call them predicate handlers, and I can pass them to a function, for example, predicate handler dot make, that would convert those, smoosh them together, make a simple static HTTP handler that we have in here. Then and since our handlers are compile time known, and so our handler slice, when we are creating them, is a compile time known thing. When we push them together and we create a function out of them, is also a compile time known. We are going to have no problem, and this is just gonna work. And also you see that the code for the server is just simpler now because of this compile time known thing. Actually, let me just do a change. Let's see. So in this stash, they didn't commit. Yes, I just even removed the config and put the config inside the init. So at compile time, basically, the only generic parameter we need to pass to the server is just the handler. If we take a look at main, this code looks the same. And we have the handler as the generic parameter, and also init takes an allocator and the configuration. And you see our handler now can wait on sleeps. And this wait is, if we look at the code, in async mode, it's just using event loop. which is really nice. It means that async stuff will work. So, and this call can be replaced by anything, by a database call, by an API call, or anything, and this will work. And we don't need async keyword anywhere in this function. So this is really nice. I really like this. I'm really happy that it is now working, because I was really hopeless. I didn't know what to do, but it's really cool now. So that is basically what I've changed since the last stream. I tried for this project to do everything on stream, but with this case, I just couldn't figure out in this stream. And I think it took me 4 or 5 hours of playing around, reading some standard library code, reading other libraries code, and thanks to their authors, both the routes library. Let me just actually mention them in here. Wakes to routes. Yes, both this library. Actually, the approach he's taking is a more complex approach than this project. So he's basically doing the same thing as we were doing, but he's also doing some weird stack allocation, so he's basically using that async call we just saw. Let me show you. You see that he's using the async call to call the handler, but for me it was a bit complex and I didn't like it. And this approach that this library is using to make the server a generic struct was much simpler and much better, and I really liked it, and I think it's a bit safer. I'm not sure. So yeah, that is pretty much it, and thank you for watching my videos. If you like this content, we need to subscribe and like this video. And if I have any problem in my code, if you want to change anything, you can do issues on GitHub, you can do pull requests, you can fork it, or you can just comment on the YouTube. You can do anything you want. So that is it. Until the next video, goodbye.